So we're doing this Battletech thing. Let's talk about accessories, things that you can utilize in Battletech that are not necessary, but help the flow of the game, right? We're trying to immerse ourselves in this narrative in Battletech with miniatures and hex maps. Maybe you're playing on a more traditional wargaming table. We want to keep the immersion. I mean, absolutely, I'm thinking about tactics and I'm crunching the numbers and I'm looking at the meta, but I'm also taking this opportunity, much like historical wargaming, to put myself in that machine, in that mech, in that moment. Make those decisions. As a mech commander, kind of step back from the table and look at what's going on. Look at what's in your command. Look at what you're responsible for. And if we're talking about mechs as a mech commander, inner sphere, that is a lot of responsibility. That's a lot to kind of navigate and manage in that narrative. So anything that I can do to kind of keep that immersion, not break that immersion, make things easier, absolutely. So a couple of ideas that I've picked up over the years of Battletech, that's what I wanted to focus on in this vlog. And we're going to get back to tactics. We're going to explore some medium and heavy mechs. And we're going to answer the question in some upcoming vlogs. Stuff happens in Battletech. How do you come back from an early critical hit? How do you come back from taking some critical damage early on when there's still a decent number of mechs and machines and vehicles on both sides? How do we navigate that? Because you never know. Headshots, critical hits, weird pilot check rolls that somehow you're going to make, but you keep on failing. It's going to happen. So how can we tactically navigate that? So in terms of player aids, the first thing that I like to do is have my mech sheets from the tech manuals printed out and in kind of these plastic inserts. Some players will laminate them. I'll use plastic inserts so I can swap them in and out. So this way we can use some dry erase pens to mark off the damage, to mark off the ammo, and navigate that. Because over time, printing them out on regular paper, writing it, rewriting it, erasing it, the paper's going to wear, and it's going to be harder to track. So I like to do these on a full-sized sheet of paper. I know some players will scale that down to half sheets, so it's a little bit more easy to manage. But what I try to do ideally with Battletech is we have the hex maps or we have the wargaming table, but then we'll have a little space directly in front of us to put your put your mech sheets. I'm thinking about RPGs, navigating that. To put these technical readout sheets and a couple of other player aids there. So almost like it's like my heads up display, my heads up screen, and I can navigate and see what's going on. So I have ideally my dry erase markers, my inserted sheets ready to go. Now, in addition to that, I'll utilize a D20 or a little bit of a marker that can move up and down to track heat, to have the heat go up and down as opposed to marking it, unmarking it, marking it, unmarking it, because while I will say most Battletech players can manage heat pretty well, I'm always pushing the heat. Never tell me the odds. Chaotic, neutral, I'm going to take it. I'm going to go for the tabletop glory. So being able to push the heat and maintain that and see that is very, very important. I also have a number of kind of just generic, they're like old school poker chips. They're about the size of a poker chip and they're flat and plain. I have a number of these. So if I'm playing a bigger game of 2 or 3 lances and some support vehicles, as I move my mechs or my vehicles in the initiative phase, I can take that poker chip and just put it on the map. Put it on my mech sheet. So I know what's been activated, what hasn't been activated. And likewise, when we go into the shooting phase and I declare my targets, as I go through and finish my mechs, I'll put that token on the sheet. Now, occasionally what you'll see is dice marking the mech on the hex map or behind it. This is a player aid that will show the other opponent and show yourself the movement modifiers for the various mechs. It's one thing to calculate walking versus running, and some players will use tokens or markers for that. So you'll know, did I walk, did I run, did I jump? But knowing how many hexes you've traveled, especially if it's a larger game with multiple points of contact and multiple machines, The easiest thing is to just put a D6 right next to the miniature, usually behind it. Now, my personal feeling on that is I try to use the tiniest D6 possible because I don't want to break the immersion and I don't want to have a ton of stuff on the table, but I'm not like so crazy where you can't have, it can only be game-related stuff, no player aids, no tokens, no nothing on the table. I'm not against that, but I don't want like a giant soul-crushing D6 that's bigger than the mech behind it. That's going to kind of break the immersion, but you use what you have to use. I will use a small D6. Occasionally, if it's a really, really detailed map, City Fight, City Tech, it can be hard to kind of get in there and pick up those D6s. And I do want to keep that immersion, so I will put them on the mechs that I'm playing on the sheet. It does slow things down just a little bit because sometimes my player has to ask in calculating and declaring targets when we're doing that, just trying to figure out and crunch the numbers, what they're going to shoot at, what they're going to do, looking and being able to see that. So with that framework, the idea is to keep the game moving and to have some player aids that will help assist that narrative. The one player aid that I don't even really consider a player aid because I think it's almost mandatory for Battletech, much like a rule book. And all of the starter sets over the years had this various pack-in. Having it in some incarnation, making one, printing one, evolving one is huge. A double-sided tactical rules sheet. The phases of the game, the hit modifiers, the location modifiers, the spread table, the movement modifiers for cover or woods, and some of those different rules, the pilot check rules. Having that sheet without having to hunt through the rule book, I think is very important. If you're learning Battletech, it's nice to have those modifiers, but there are times even where I'm in the middle of a game and I'm managing a lot, and I'm like, I should know this. I should have this stuff memorized by now, and I usually do have it memorized, but what is the range modifier? What is the plus something modifier? What is that hit location? It's nice to have that right on a sheet that I can look at, I can calculate, I can report, and we can manage. So as much as that's a player aid, much like I have a copy of the rule book next to me, I consider that almost to be mandatory. So turning it over to my fellow mech warriors, my fellow mech commanders, my fellow Battletech enthusiasts, we're going all in. We're blinging everything out. What are some of those Battletech player aids that help facilitate not only remembering the rules and keeping the game going, but helping you keep in the action, keep you rolling the dice, keeping and setting that narrative? What do you consider mandatory?